Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with another classic pay-per-view review as nominated by my Patreon backers. And folks, this one is a show I've been wanting to review for quite some time. Ever since I began the classic segment, I've wanted to talk about this show because it's very near and dear to my heart. It's WrestleMania 19, March 30th, 2003 at Safeco Field in Seattle, Washington. This show was nominated by Mike Ryan, Cougar Mackey, and what the hell, me. I wanted to end this year on a high note with a show, like I said, it's very near and dear to me. It's my favorite WrestleMania of all time, partly because I was there in the audience. It was my first ever WrestleMania I attended, the second ever wrestling show I attended, period. And before that, the first show I attended was a small independent show at Roosevelt High School in Portland, Oregon in October of 2002. A friend of mine and I went there, and coincidentally, the show celebrated Buddy Rose's 50th birthday. So that's how I met Buddy a couple years before I started training with him as a wrestler. So kind of a nice little quinky ding there. But yeah, just crazy to go from like indie show in high school gym to WrestleMania 19. 54,097 people packed Safeco Field that day. It garnered 560,000 pay-per-view buys, about a 1.08 buy rate. It is the lowest number of buys for WrestleMania since 1998, and it's the lowest it's been ever since. It's never gotten that low ever since then. But I wouldn't use that number as something to indicate the quality of the show, because it's definitely not proportional. Like I mentioned, I was there at the show myself, my then girlfriend at the time, and another friend of mine. We all went there. My dad gave us the ride up to Seattle from Portland, and we were on the floor. You'll never be able to find us. I've looked for years trying to find myself in the crowd. It just can't be done. I tried to bring unique signs and everything, just couldn't see us. We were on the very, very back of the floor. I think we were on like the last row, the second to last row back. And from where we were sitting, if you look over to your right a little bit, that's where the set was. So we're on this really weird angle where the cameras didn't really get, so we didn't get on TV. And also, it was kind of a crappy place to still watch the show because we were so far back, we had to look over everyone's heads to see the action. And if anyone stood up, we were toast. And from where I was sitting, you could either look at the big screen up here in the corner, or you could look right up above me. There was a screen like directly above my head. I was able to look up and see. But you damn sure couldn't see what was going on in the ring. So that was kind of a bummer to me, but it's just one more memory that I have about this show. I might regale you with occasional memories of how this show went to me as a fan as we go on with this review. One of the reasons this show is so memorable to me was just how it looked throughout the day. WrestleMania on the West Coast is such a trip because of how light it is for the bulk of the show. Like WrestleMania 31 a few years ago in California, very similar thing. With Safeco here, the dome was closed, but you have all these points where all this natural light comes flooding in. So you've got that kind of interesting contrast, interesting look of like the stadium lighting and the light from outside mixing together, made for a very unique look. Also, fun fact, this show was John Cena's first WrestleMania, technically. On the episode of Heat, before the show began, he was supposed to do a rap battle on stage with Fabulous, but that got canceled because Fabulous had a couple of arrests before the show, and I think there was also this issue of like pride on behalf of the rapper who didn't want to like, demean himself by rapping a wrestler and possibly losing. So he pulled out, so Cena was just by himself in his white WrestleMania hoodie, and he was kind of rapping to two cardboard cutouts, making fun of Fabulous and Jay-Z. And that was pretty much all there was to it. He did say in the rap, though, that by next year he'd be main eventing WrestleMania. He wasn't exactly right. He opened the following year's WrestleMania, but then by the next year, he was off by a year or so, but he was pretty much on the money. He called his shot. The intro package for this show is so regal and majestic, talking about the history and the splendor and the magnificence of WrestleMania and all the different sound bites you hear from the wrestlers as the package goes on. Talks about like how wonderful WrestleMania is, how much it means just like as part of the business and everything. Hulk Hogan gets one soundbite in, and of course it's about himself. Oh, I'm a body slam onto the Giant Brother. Everyone was in awe. No one else talks like that in the entire package. This is the first WrestleMania since the brand split began, so you have two commentary teams on the night. You've got Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler for Raw, Michael Cole and Taz for SmackDown. The show begins with the Cruiserweight Championship match as Matt Hardy, version 1. He won the belts last month at No Way Out against Billy Kidman. He defends against Rey Mysterio. This is Mysterio's first of what would be many WrestleManias. Also began his annual trend of dressing up in some kind of comic-themed, comic-inspired outfit for WrestleMania specifically. This outfit was inspired by Daredevil, and this is before the Netflix show made Daredevil cool again. This is right after the Ben Affleck movie, and it's not the same thing. Mysterio had always worn comic-inspired outfits before in WCW, but at this time, he was kind of just saving it just for WrestleMania once a year. I love the Mattitude fact here. Matt often wonders how they did WrestleMania without him. Again, I love Matt Hardy V1, and this is one of the many reasons why. There is that Kellamania sign on the hard cam. We'll be seeing it all night. At least now I know the origins of the sign after having seen Insurrection in 2002 and reviewed that for the channel. The action is fast and furious from the beginning. We do get some early interference from the little MFer, Shannon Moore, not just early on, but throughout the match as well. Taz with some more nuggets of wisdom on commentary here. First of all, he calls Shannon Moore's followers morons. So Mattitude followers are MFers, and Shannon Moore followers are morons. I thought it was pretty funny. And he says, well, Matt's off the banana juice, Cole. He's not doing the BJs anymore. He's drinking tea now. I saw, Matt and Shannon backstage teabagging each other, Cole. Like, wow. Wow. Amazing the stuff that Taz was able to get away with on commentary here. We get a 619 attempt. Moore trips up Ray. Matt hits a twist of fate. Ray kicks out. Like, I'm sorry, that's a finish, right? Interference spot, finisher, boom, that should be it. But no, Ray kicks out of it, and we go to some more action afterward. At one point, Matt attempts a razor's edge off the second rope, and Ray counters with this huge Hurricane Rana spot. Lots more Shannon Moore interference as we go on. He gets hit by accident by Matt. More crazy stuff. Mysterio goes for a victory roll, but Matt sits on him, grabs the ropes with a dirty win. He retains the championship. I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars out of 4. I really wanted to rank it higher than I did. I loved the athleticism in this matchup for start. I think it was a great way to get the fans riled up for the opening of the show, but there was just way too much interference for my taste. It really took me out of it. I think the more Shannon got up and got involved, just kind of took away from the match. Also, I would have had Ray kick out of a move besides the Twist of Fate. I felt kind of like lessened the impact of Matt's finisher. Now, granted, the previous month at No Way Out, Kidman kicked out of the Twist of Fate as well, but then at least Matt followed it up with a giant super Twist of Fate off the top, almost a minute afterward, not very long after the fact. This one had a lot more action after the finisher, so I would have had Ray kick out something else. That's just me. And so yeah, Matt and Shannon can go back to teabagging each other now. Backstage, the Miller Lite Catfight girls arrive. These two were the center of an ad campaign by Miller Lite where there's just two hot ladies who get into a fight and they tear each other's clothes off, and that was the whole gist of it. And this is the lone celebrity involvement you will see at this show, save for the live performance from the band we'll see later, but this is pretty much it as far as other celebrity involvement. Kind of a down year for celebrities for WrestleMania this year, and we'll see them a lot throughout this show, and I think their whole involvement is incredibly stupid. And I know a lot of people will go in the comments section and call me a snowflake or an SJW for deriding this, but the fact that they're women has nothing to do with it. It's just the fact that it's a very stupid segment and kind of it's a detriment to the show.
I heard the Catfight girls really dig, Taz. How'd you hear that? I just made it up. Well, nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen.
Earlier on Heat, Nunzio and the FBI lured Nathan Jones to a locker room, and that's where the Big Show and A-Train beat down Nathan Jones and incapacitated him for his tag team match later on. He's supposed to be the Undertaker's tag team partner tonight against Show and A-Train, but now it's not looking so good. We then get a live performance by what Tony Chimmel calls WWE's favorite band in the whole world, Limp Bizkit. Yet somehow Kid Rock gets inducted to the Hall of Fame before they do. What a travesty of justice. They do a live performance of the song Rollin', and I'll admit, I thought this was pretty badass. I was their target demo, you might say. I was an 18-year-old boy. I was a fan of Limp Bizkit and Korn and Eminem and ICP and all that stuff, so this did it for me, you might say. As the song goes on, The Undertaker rolls out on his bike with the American flag draped behind him, and the crowd just explodes for him. We then go to our handicap match here as The Undertaker goes 1-on-2 against the Big Show and A-Train with their nice dual pyro. So yeah, it was supposed to be a tag team match, but then they wrote Nathan Jones out earlier in the day because apparently he was too green to perform at that level. Apparently they spent all week training and practicing at The Undertaker's home in preparation for the match, but Nathan Jones just couldn't get it. And so, don't know why they put their eggs in that basket to sign Nathan Jones and put him in this high-profile match, only to discover he was shit and couldn't perform at that level with 3 guys who were who could have carried him to a good match. Albert, Big Show, and Taker are all very good, safe, reliable workers, and they couldn't pull a decent performance out of Nathan Jones. So that shows you how bad Nathan Jones was, apparently. Big Evil gets a hot start, but soon the numbers game catches up. I do think it's interesting, by the way, in this match, how they, between this match and the last one with Mysterio and Hardy, they both start out with a dodged sneak attack at the beginning with some element of 2-on-1 involved. At least with this one, it's all legal, but with the first match, it was like, ooh, Shannon Moore interfering. But it's very similar how those stories are told. Show beats up Taker on the outside as Albert distracts the ref. There's a big shave your back chant for Albert, or A-Train, I should say. Taker counters a chokeslam attempt with an armbar. More Taker beat down, more double teaming. My favorite part of this match is during the match, as A-Train's getting his heat on the Undertaker, you actually hear a train roll by and blow its horn. So I was like, oh man, A-Train's biggest fan just appeared.
Oh, look at this. Good suplex connects. Nice back suplex.
A choke slam. Big Show then leaps out of the ring. After doing the choke slam, just like looks over and darts out of the ring, sprints about 30-something, 40-something feet up the ramp to try and cut off Nathan Jones, who makes a surprise appearance. He runs up, kicks Big Show, and knocks him on his ass. Then he hits a kick on an A-Train in the ring. I guess he's legal because it was supposed to be a tag team match, and he's back in, so it makes it a tag again. You know, Nathan was good enough to hit 2 kicks in the ring, but not enough for a whole match. Taker barely gets Albert up for a tombstone. He and Jones win the match, and Taker is now 11-0, but that's a part of the streak you don't really hear that much about. I'm going to give this one 2 stars out of 4. This match was more exciting for me to watch than like the Taker Big Show match from No Way Out the previous month. Just, I think, because of the story told here of how Undertaker was going to try and fight his way out of this 2-on-1 situation. It's a good use of Nathan Jones, but it's just kind of funny how they got to that point, ultimately to use him for one little bit. But don't get used to seeing Nathan, though, because he'd be taken off TV shortly after this. He'd come back months later as a heel, and so then he would actually get a run with him and Matt Morgan, and oddly enough, Big Show and A-Train would form this giant team. I also think Brock Lesnar was part of it as well. And so there was this huge, just giant, beefy guy heel stable they had. And so he was part of that for a little bit, but then he pieced out during an Australian tour. He just quit the business because he didn't like to travel anymore, so he basically got a free ride home. And that's the last we saw Nathan Jones in WWE. Backstage, the Catfight girls meet up with Stacy Keibler and Tori Wilson. Turns out they're all big fans of one another's work. One of the Catfight girls says in as robotic a tone as possible how much she loves the testicles thing that Stacy Keibler came up with to market for Test. But yeah, this is just some, like, clearly this dialogue was all written for them and they read it about as inorganically as possible. We go back to JR and King on commentary. Jim Ross with a message of support to the troops who just 10 days before the show got deployed for the Iraq War. I forgot how soon the Iraq War began, like around this show, and it's crazy to think of all that's transpired in the world since then. But yeah, it's just crazy how close the deployment happened before this show. We then go to a heat recap for the World Tag Title match that not only got cut from the main show, but wasn't even the match advertised in the official program. I have the official Mania 19 program from when I bought it. You can see it's supposed to be RVD and Kane going against Regal and Storm again from No Way Out, but no, because Regal got sick, as I mentioned, and so then Chief Morley replaced him, and so that match was put on Sunday Night Heat, and they show a recap where the Dudley Boys interfere. They attack both teams, so Morley and Storm retain the championships. And Lance Storm still complains about this injustice on Twitter to this day. Women's Championship triple threat as Victoria, who's accompanied by Stevie Richards, defends against Jazz and Trish Stratus. This is back when Victoria had her psycho quasi-lesbian gimmick going on. She came out to the song by Tattoo for her entrance theme. This is a good time. This is a good period of time for Victoria here. Jazz and Victoria beat up Trish together in this match. At one point, they do this weird inverted double shoulder breaker on her, and oh my God, it looks so dangerous. Like, I'm surprised Trish didn't get seriously hurt from this. It looked so bad. Trish throws some wild-looking elbows and forearms in this matchup here. Those look like if she was off by an inch, she could totally fuck you up. Trish with a big fiery comeback. Everyone gets a chance to show off against each other. What I like about this match is every possible combination happens here. Not just with the double team, the 2-on-1 stuff, but also you have Trish wrestling Jazz, Victoria wrestling Trish, and all these different combinations kind of going in and out, and it's a pretty seamless integration. There's not much awkward, time between transitions, between chapters, I should say. So very fluid match in that sense. Victoria goes for a moonsault and misses. She dumps Jazz out of the ring, but you can see Jazz doing all the work there. It actually gets a bit of a "you fucked up" chant because Jazz does all the work in that spot. Stevie Richards comes in with a chair and hits himself. One of the few times you'll see that spot actually look good. I've seen stuff where people try to hit themselves with an object like bouncing off the ropes. It never looks good. Stevie made it look good. Stratus faction onto Richards. The ref's distracted, the whole time, but he's doing everything he can to keep his head turned away. It's like Jack Doan is, he's like, oh man, I want to look, but I can't. Trish fights out of the Widow's Peak, hits the chick kick to win the match and regain the Women's Championship. I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars out of 4. It was a fast-paced, exciting match. Everyone looked good. Yeah, that's all I got to say about it. Backstage, we get a fantastic promo by Hollywood Rock here. It is very reminiscent of his first promo after turning heel in '97 when he chastised the fans for saying, "Die, Rocky, die," and Rocky sucks. He says he could not care less about the people because the people turned their backs on him when he went to Hollywood. Great line by him here. He says he wants to fulfill his destiny and beat Austin at WrestleMania. He has a great line where he says, "One thing I learned in Hollywood is that people don't care about Act 1 and Act 2. All they care about is Act 3. And then he ends the promo going, finally. Ooh, I got chills. That's like a really good Rock promo. We get a triple threat match for the WWE Tag Team titles, which are SmackDown Championships. Team Angle, Haas and Benjamin defend against Los Guerreros and the team of Rhyno and Chris Benoit, who I believe are only put together as a team because they have a shared past and they both had neck surgery. Good tandem moves by Benjamin and Haas in this match. This is their first WrestleMania, by the way, and they just performed so well in it. Benoit looks intense as hell in this match. He lights up Haas with some chops and suplexes. Eddie, I love this thing where he teases a test of strength with Rhyno, but he gets him lulled in and he just hits him with this super quick drop kick. Like, no one could do that faster than Eddie Guerrero did. Fabulous work between Eddie and Benoit as well when they're in the match together on a one-on-one basis. A real cool final sequence. Eddie crushes Shelton with a frog splash while he's in a pinfall. Charlie Haas and Rhyno take turns, looking great. Rhyno hits Chavo with the gore. Fights on the outside. Shelton Benjamin has been the legal man this entire time after he sold the frog splash and falls onto Chavo to win the match and retain the titles for Team Angle. I'm going to give this one 3 stars out of 4. I know I didn't do a very good job describing the match because there's so much going on. I recommend you check it out. Really entertaining work with all 6 guys and really just a showcase of some of the best of SmackDown. This wasn't exactly the SmackDown 6, but it was a lot of members of that group and they performed very well here. Backstage, Stacy Keibler and Tori Wilson are still with the Catfight Girls. Stacy and Tori begin arguing over who created WrestleMania, Vince McMahon or Hulk Hogan, and then they leave, and then the Catfight Girls also do the argument. One of them pronounces it Hulk Hogan.
Mr. McMahon, Hulk Hogan. Mr. McMahon, Hulk Hogan.
And then they go, let's settle this in the ring, in bed, in the ring, in bed. Okay then, they walk off. Golly gee, what could this mean? Now it's time for Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho. This dream match, it seemed at the time, between 2 generational icons. This is actually Shawn's first WrestleMania back since returning to wrestling earlier the previous year. These guys have been at each other's throats for months, all the way since December of '02, leading up to this matchup here. And the whole story was how Jericho was always seen as kind of being like the next Shawn Michaels, someone who idolized Shawn Michaels in his youth and early in his career, but now he believes he has surpassed him in every facet. And so now he wants to try to prove it by beating Michaels in the ring. Shawn, with his traditional super fancy Shawn Michaels WrestleMania intro, he's got like these confetti cannons. He's got 4 or 5 of them on the ramp down, and maybe 3 of them work, 2 of them don't, and it's just funny to see Shawn reacting to that. And then, oh, what a badass shot though, when Shawn gets in the ring and does his pose with a Safeco Field logo behind him. You've just got all of the row of pyro going off there. What an awesome shot. The match starts off with some traditional wrestling, which catches Lawler off guard. It's like, oh my God, wrestling in WrestleMania, I can't believe it. Jericho slaps Shawn in the face, and they officially come to blows. The grappling of the chain wrestling is officially donezo. We get some more fighting before we see a figure 4 applied. HBK looking good here. There's fighting on the outside. Shawn goes for a dropkick on the floor. But why would you do that? Because we'll see what hurts you just as much. Jericho catches him though in midair, puts him in the walls of Jericho, and then he starts throwing Michaels back first into the turnbuckle post. Jericho works the back almost exclusively from here. Jericho with a lot more heat on Shawn as the minutes pass. He does the HBK pose as a way to mock him, but that just sparks Shawn's comeback. He does the kip up and he just goes ham from there. We get a lion salt by Jericho and the kick out. Chris catches Shawn with the walls once again, but there's a rope break. Jericho even hits Shawn with sweet chin music, but it's not enough. Michaels counters a back suplex off the top rope with a cross body. Michaels gets out of the walls once again. again. Jericho's starting to lose it. He walks right into Sweet Chin Music, and both men fall down. Michaels flips out of a back suplex attempt by Jericho, rolls Chris up, and wins the match. I'm going to give this one 4 stars out of 4. This was a beautiful, fantastic match. A great story, great chemistry between these two. For guys who hadn't like wrestled on a big stage before, I think they just did great here. I could watch this match over and over again and find something new each time. This is, I think, as far as their rivalry goes, which went well into 2008, on and off, I think this is probably one of their better matches just on a pure wrestling standpoint. They would have some wild brawls later on, but this is like, as pure wrestling goes, I think this was great. After the match, Jericho hugs Michaels. He's like tearing up. He's all sad, but then he walks back and just takes Shawn to Dick Kick City. Oh, that sportsmanship was a ruse. What a bastard. And now here's your piss break for the show. We get another live performance by Limp Bizkit. They perform the theme song for WrestleMania, Crack Addict. And then we get the cat fight. The Miller Lite cat fight girls show up and are about to have a sexy fight on the world's largest bed that's on stage. Stacy Keibler shows up. She wants to make it a threesome. Ooh, and then Tori Wilson comes out, makes it a fatal 4-way. And so then the catfight girls start lightly, walloping each other with pillows. It looks super bad. Meanwhile, Stacy and Tori are actually kind of having a match on the floor. It's pretty surprising that they were doing roll-ups and stuff. And then they trip up Coach, who's just moderating this whole thing, by the way. They roll on top of Coachman for a bit of a comedy spot. And then they pants Coachman. They roll him up. And that's how the match ends. I guess just the women as a whole win now. That's where it ends. The 4 women in their underwear, they raise each other's arms and pose to not the audience. They're behind you, ladies. And that was it. And I think they cut the Raw tag title match for this nonsense. By the way, this, I guess you could call it a match. I give it 0 stars. Back to the real action. Triple H defends the World Heavyweight Championship against the former 5-time WCW champion Booker T, who won a Battle Royal on Raw to become the #1 contender. The whole story they're going for with Booker T here is kind of a rags to riches story. As a youth, he had a humble past. He committed a crime as a youth. He went to jail for it, and so now as an adult, he's trying to make something of himself, trying to become a success in wrestling and in WWE. This feud, this particular storyline was racist as hell, and if you disagree, then you're fooling yourself, because from the very beginning, Triple H dropped the race card. He's like, people like you don't become world champion with your nappy hair and you're a thug. I'm sorry, those 2 terms are racist as hell, because one, thug is a code word, and nappy hair is almost exclusively used to describe black people. That's racist as hell. People like you don't become champion. They try to spin it later saying, oh, Booker T is an entertainer, and people like you, entertainers, don't become world champion. This despite the fact Booker T is already a former multiple-time world champion elsewhere, and you've had plenty of entertainers as world champion, like The Rock and, Hulk Hogan, among others. It's just like, what are they going with this? The way they tried to back out of it was foolish. Triple H tossed $1 to Booker T in the bathroom, telling him to get a towel. Tell me that's not racist. And by the way, I'm not offended that they used race in this angle. I'm not saying you can't use race and racism to build a storyline. I think it's possible to do that. I think that if you do it right, then you can totally incorporate these real life issues of racial bias and stuff into wrestling storylines. And by doing it right, I mean have the racist lose. I'm not saying that Triple H is a racist himself, by the way. I'm saying the angle is hella racist. And, I listened to the Bruce Pritchard podcast about this show and Bruce trying to explain how this wasn't racist just made me roll my eyes, because it was completely racist. Again, if you don't think it's racist, then you're fooling yourself. Anyway, Booker gets the advantage early on, even arm drags Triple H off the top rope in the first couple of minutes. They fight on the outside and Triple H regains the momentum. Triple H just lays into Booker, but the Booker man keeps kicking out. He pulls a DDT out of nowhere for a hope spot. Jerry keeps trying to bring up Booker's criminal past, and JR has just had it. He basically almost swears on air in response.
Or maybe he's having a flashback to, those days behind bars. Why don't you get off that horse? You've ridden it to the ground.
Booker goes for his sidekick, but he bounces off the top rope into the outside as a result. It's a pretty freaky looking bump. Ric Flair beats up Booker on the outside. Triple H with an Indian deathlock on Booker, and Jim Ross is salivating. He is like having an orgasm over this move. He's like, I haven't seen this move used in years. And he just goes on for minutes about how he hasn't seen this move before, and he's just going gaga over it. Booker's knee is now useless. He falls over when he's trying to get whipped out of the corner. Booker with the scissor scissors kick out of nowhere. A slow pinfall leads to a kick out. Booker and Triple H fight in the corner. Booker knocks Triple H off, hits Ric Flair. Lawler tries to defend Flair, and JR just screams at him.
This is very disrespectful on the part of Booker T. Flair has no business up there, damn it!
We then get a Harlem Hangover off the top rope by Booker T. That's kind of an old school move. He hadn't done that since WCW days. Right on Triple H's head. Flair puts Triple H's foot on the ropes to save him. Both men are getting up. They're both incredibly wobbly. They're spent. They've taken so much out of each other in this matchup here. But Triple H strikes first, hits the pedigree, waits 30 fucking seconds to finally cover Booker T and get the 1-2-3 in the pinfall to retain the championship. What bullshit on a number of levels. Like I said before years ago in my Reign of Terror video, you know, the fact that he waited so long to cover him, any other match, any other circumstance, Booker would have kicked out of that. Anyone else would have kicked out of the pedigree after that long. But for Booker T to lose after that long of a wait, that infuriated me. Like, this is probably the worst, one of the most incorrect calls in the history of WrestleMania booking, was having Triple H go over in the way that he did. After pulling the race card, the least they could have done was have Booker T win and vanquish the racist. That being said, as a match, I give it 3 stars out of 4. I think it was still a great match. A lot of moments where Booker T really has Triple H on the ropes. And you had the moment, oh my God, he's going to win this thing. There was slightly less interference from Ric Flair than, say, Shannon Moore in the opening matchup here. It wasn't as blatant. It wasn't as frequent, I would say, as the Shannon Moore stuff. But yeah, again, I think the wrong guy won, but as a match itself, in that bubble, I think it was a fine match. We then get a match 20 years in the making, a street fight as Mr. McMahon takes on Hulk Hogan. You know, the whole question is, who created Hulkamania? Vince McMahon or Hulk Hogan himself? Their long and storied relationship, their good and bad times were brought up in the build for this. They even talk about Hulk Hogan testifying against Vince McMahon in the steroid trial in the 1990s, how they tried to put him out of business in WCW. They really do a good job kind of like blurring the lines of like fiction and reality in this story here. And it's one of the more, honestly, one of the more captivating builds for a Mania match in this particular show. Of course, McMahon cost Hogan his rematch against The Rock the previous month at No Way Out, thanks to shady referee Sylvain Grenier, who we will be seeing a little bit later in this show. At the contract signing earlier in the month, Vince knocks out Hogan and makes him sign the contract in his own blood. Oh, and by the way, if Hogan loses tonight, he must retire. Cole runs down the entire, he does kind of like a Cliff Notes version of the relationship between Hogan and McMahon as Vince makes his entrance. He says, their relationship changed in 1993 when Hulk Hogan left to go to WCW. Like, dude, no, he left to do Thunder in Paradise. The match opens with a slap by Vince, followed by a tackle by Hogan. Hogan's on top for a long time, is beating the shit out of Vince until Vince takes him down with a clothesline. McMahon works the arm, has him on the test of strength. Hogan comes back. They fight on the outside. Vince makes a flex, and the noise he makes, I could have gone my whole life without hearing that noise.
That strategy. And now mocking.
Vince hopes to hit Hogan with a chair, but Hulk ducks. He beats up Vince and bashes him in the head with a chair, and Vince is bleeding, and Vince is bleeding a lot. You know, say what you will about Vince as a wrestler, but when it comes time for him to show color, oh man, he bleeds like no one else in the business. More chair shots. Vince is in a bad way here. Hogan goes for a headshot, but Vince ducks. Hogan nails Hugo Savinovich, the Spanish announcer, with the chair shot instead. Holy crap, he takes one for the team there. Vince regains the advantage, decks Hogan, and then here's one of the crazier spots in the whole night. Vince produces a ladder from under the ring. They fight to the Spanish announce table again. Vince climbs the ladder. He puts Hogan on the table. He does a diving leg drop onto Hogan through the table. Vince rolls Hogan into the ring, pinfall, but there's a kick out. Oh my God, the stuff like Vince put himself through for this match, and Hogan for that matter. Like, how often did Hogan get put through a table in wrestling at all in his prime, or even in WCW, much less like how crazy it is to see it happen here. After Hogan kicks out, Vince goes to the outside, grabs a steel pipe, peers over the ring very slowly, and what an amazing shot. Oh my God, give that cameraman the $10,000, because that is just an iconic shot of bloody Vince McMahon peering over the apron, steel pipe in hand, like the devil himself. Like, that is the evil of Vince McMahon in a nutshell on TV. I love that shot. Hogan, though, hits a low blow. Both men are down. Suddenly, a man in a trench coat enters the ring, and holy shit, it's Roddy Piper. We haven't seen him in WWE since 1996. So this is kind of a crazy deal. I distinctly remember sitting in the crowd watching this and seeing the man in the trench coat make his way to the ring. I couldn't see the face or anything, but I thought, that'd be kind of weird as a Piper. That'd be weird if that were Piper, basically what I thought. I didn't know distinctively it was him, but I'm like, I would buy it if it was him, and sure enough, it was. Piper grabs the lead pipe. He teases all day he's going to hit Vince with it. Like, he's like doing this thing where he's kind of keeping his body open, so he's like leaning toward Vince, but you can see him kind of like turning toward Hogan occasionally. Then he finally decks Hogan with the pipe, and he leaves, and we don't see Piper the rest of the match. We will see him. This is the beginning of his first return to the company until they fired him for his comments on the HBO wrestling documentary. That's a whole other story. So what a cameo, though, by Piper here. Hogan kicks out of the lead pipe shot. Vince throws the referee out of the ring and brings in his insurance policy. Referee Sylvain Grenier, the same one who screwed Hogan at No Way Out. Another referee tries to stop him, but he gets beat up for his efforts. Leg drop by Vince. We get a kick out, and Hogan hulks up. Hogan throws Grenier out of the ring. Taz yells, "Parlez-vous français?" Hogan hits 3 leg drops, by God, onto Vince McMahon. We get a 3 count from the real referee, and Hogan wins the matchup here. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I know it's very high for this matchup. I don't care. It wasn't a pretty match, but it was physical. I love the story, and what an absolute car crash of a spectacle this was. Just everything involved, like, you know, the stuff with the pipe, there's Piper, Hugo Savinovich getting taken out with a headshot, the table spot, the peering over the apron, bloody thing. Oh my God, everything was just great here. Just a fun match to watch, to be sure. After the match, Shane McMahon making one of his few appearances he made during this time, post-invasion angle. He walks down the aisle and he helps his dad up in the ring. Vince throws up the deuce to Hogan on the way out. And this feud here between McMahon and Hogan would not end here. Like the SmackDown after WrestleMania, Vince would fire Hogan anyway in kayfabe, and then that would beget this whole Mr. America angle. But that's something I've already talked about once before. I might go into more detail with it later, but that's a whole story for another time. It's the end of an epic rivalry as Stone Cold Steve Austin takes on The Rock one more time. Despite everything The Rock accomplished in wrestling, the one thing he never accomplished was beating Steve Austin at WrestleMania. These two faced off before WrestleManias 15 and 17, with Austin winning both of those, so now The Rock says he's obsessed with it. He wants to fulfill his destiny and beat Austin at WrestleMania. Interesting fact about this particular match, Austin spent the previous night in the hospital after having elevated blood pressure due to a lack of sleep and too much caffeine, drinking too much energy drinks and coffee. Austin thought he was going to have a heart attack. He goes there, gets the elevated blood pressure diagnosis. So he comes back and he basically checks out of the hospital hours before he is call time for WrestleMania. It's a pretty scary moment there. The match begins with both men throwing hands. They trade blows for a while until The Rock attacks Austin's knee. As The Rock's putting the boost to Stone Cold, JR on commentary says, "Stone Cold's not going to quit, folks. Stone Cold has never quit on us, ever. Well, you know, there was that one time, you know, several months ago, he took his ball, went home, we kind of buried him for it on air. But, you know, besides that, it doesn't count. He's no quitter, damn it." The Rock then puts on Austin's vest. They fight some more. Austin hits Rock with the Rock bottom. We get a kick out. Austin goes for the stunner, but The Rock catches it, gives him a stunner. So they trade finishers, and they each kick out of each other's finishers. Austin hits a stunner. We get a kick out. Everyone's got their finishers saved up here. Rock goes for the people's elbow, but Austin gets out of the way. Rock hits a spine buster and nails the elbow this time. There's a kick out. I've lost count of how many finishers have been kicked out of in this matchup so far, but we're not done yet, because then The Rock hits not one, not two, but 3 rock bottoms. It takes 3 of them to put Austin away because he kicked out of the first 2. Finally, the third one, Austin goes down for the count, and The Rock has gotten that monkey off his back, and he's beaten Austin at WrestleMania, finally. I'm going to give this one 3 stars out of 4. What a war these two went through, and what a great culmination to their classic rivalry that spans several years. It was a great story, although at times it did get a little repetitive. And also, knowing what we know now about Austin and his kind of political machinations at the time, you just know that he had to argue for 3 rock bottoms to put him away. Nothing less would suffice. After the match, Austin walks back up the ramp, salutes the fans, and that is the end of Austin as a wrestler. That was his last official match before retiring. They certainly made no mention of it on commentary or in the build that Austin was retiring after this match, but sure enough, this was it. And so I feel kind of privileged to have witnessed Austin's final match as a wrestler. It's really the end of an era with Austin going out riding off into the sunset. You know, The Rock may have been obviously the bigger crossover star, but, you know, The Rock's success I don't think would have been possible without Austin being one of the main catalysts for the boom period the company went on several years earlier. Main event time, WWE Championship on the line as Kurt Angle defends against Brock Lesnar. This is kind of a momentous occasion here because it's the first time a WrestleMania has been main evented by someone besides Steve Austin, The Rock, or Triple H since WrestleMania 14. It's been a long time, but this is finally kind of breaks the combo, so to speak. Back in January, Brock Lesnar won the Royal Rumble match, earned a shot at Kurt Angle's championship that he lost back at Survivor Series. The previous month before this, at No Way Out, in the 3-on-2 handicap match between Team Angle versus Lesnar and Benoit, Kurt Angle re-injured his neck. And so the big question going into this show was Kurt going to be able to compete and defend his championship? There was even a plan initially that Kurt was going to drop the belt to Lesnar on SmackDown, and then I think the contingency plan was they were going to put Benoit in as the challenger against Lesnar in its place. But then at the last minute, Kurt gutted it out, said, I want to wrestle at WrestleMania. So they pulled an old switcheroo and had Eric Angle do some twin magic in the match on SmackDown, shades of Survivor Series 2000. So Kurt was able to retain the championship in that match on SmackDown, but then Stephanie says the match at Mania is still happening, but now Kurt does not get any help. So it's important to remember that going into this match, before anything even happens, Kurt Angle is already pretty fucked. Like, he's got the broken neck, he's got a whole litany of other injuries, he's basically being held together with like twine and a wish at this point. Like, the fact that he went into this match at all is something that's truly astounding. The match begins with some graps, some chain wrestling. Angle moves on to working the injured ribs of Lesnar, which he's been targeting the last couple of weeks. Lesnar still has some power moves he hits Angle with, but Angle gets Lesnar damn high in the air with a German suplex. Another German into the corner, which is pretty crazy to see. Angle has Brock in somewhat of a rear naked choke for a long time, very similar to the spot they did in No Way Out the previous month. Lesnar throws Angle into the corner a couple times to break it. Lesnar finally makes a comeback, but Angle cuts him off with some more suplexes. Lesnar goes to the F5, but Angle counters it into an ankle lock. Angle keeps fighting, keeps cutting off Lesnar. At one point, he hits Lesnar with a German that causes Brock to do a backflip onto his stomach, which is really impressive. We get the Angle slam, but Lesnar kicks out of that. Lesnar gets up, hits an F5, and Taz goes wild.
F5's coming!
But then Angle kicks out of that. They say it's the first time any man has kicked out of either man's finishers. I don't know if that's actually true. I could be wrong, but that's what they say at least. Angle goes for the ankle lock again, but we get a rope break. Angle goes for another Angle slam. Lesnar gets out of that, hits the second F5 of the match, and you think that's going to be it. But then Brock just kind of sits there, looks over at the corner, and does a smile. And I saw that, I thought, oh my God, he's going to hit the shooting star press. Like, I'd always heard that Brock could do a shooting star press in OVW, and so when I saw him kind of like look over the corner, I knew that's what he was going to go for. And then you all know what happens here. He jumps off the rope after kind of like faking himself out there. He doesn't get the full rotation. He lands right on his head and neck. Kind of bumps into Angle on the way down, instant concussion. And that's like best case scenario. Like, he would have been dead if he didn't have such like a beefy neck and giant shoulder muscles. Like, that should have killed him. So he's concussed now. Angle just tries to go for a cover, but out of instinct, Lesnar kicks out. They call an audible. They do the third F5, and they just go home. Lesnar wins the match. Now both men are fucked. Kurt's got all his injuries, and Lesnar just KO'd himself in front of everybody. It really should have been like one of like the biggest WrestleMania moments of all time for Brock to hit the shooting star to put Kurt away, but instead it ends up being like one of like the biggest Mania botches of all time. And yes, in hindsight, you know, looking back, no, Lesnar did not need to do the shooting star press, but hey, if he had hit it, it would have been badass. I'm going to give this one 3.5 stars out of 4. It's a damn near perfect match, if not for that horrific shooting star press botch near the very end, which is why I took half a star off it. But still, what an awesome, gutsy performance by both guys, especially Kurt Angle, given what we know now about how injured he was, and for him to keep performing at that level with a guy as big and athletic as Brock was just amazing. So really a great performance by both guys and a great way to close the show out. So after this WrestleMania, Angle took several months off to get his neck surgery. Lesnar was out for a little bit with his concussion, but he would come back and get into a nice little mini program with John Cena over the title at Backlash. But again, this is months before Cena was ever considered a true main event player. My final grade for WrestleMania 19 is an A-. Even if I were to remove the personal bias I have for having been at that show live and in person to see everything, I still think Mania 19 is one of the stronger more complete, well-rounded WrestleManias of all time. There's not a bad match on that card, unless you count the Miller Lite Catfight Girls bullshit with Stacy and Tori. Everything else was super strong. The only other thing I didn't like about this show was the finish to Triple H Booker T, but even then, everything else about this show was just top-notch. Like, I loved Michael's Jericho, Hogan McMahon, Austin Rock, Lesnar Angle. Just those four pillars helped holding up the rest of the show, which was also good to great on its own. So I really have no huge complaints about this show other than the two I mentioned. Again, it's a very strong show, and I think one of the best Manias of all time. My personal favorite Mania, and I know it's the favorite for a lot of people as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review of WrestleMania 19, folks. I hope you appreciate my little journey back through one of my favorite wrestling memories of all time. If you want to play a role in determining which classic shows I review, be they good, bad, or somewhere in the middle, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the opportunity to nominate classic shows for me to review in the future. Next time, I'm going way back to the early 90s, and I'm reviewing the first ever WCW Super Brawl. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.